I bought a cursed clown on the deep web. As with all things humans create or invent, there are always extremes regarding their benefits and drawbacks. The internet today allows us to do things we never thought possible, things we used to only see in the most outlandish science fiction movies. From a young age, I was amazed by technological advances and eager to move forward as quickly as possible to discover what companies would come up with next. Given that I was so immersed in the subject, I informed my parents that I would study a career in technology or communications. I would go on and on about how I would do this or that, how I would invent amazing machines or incredible devices as soon as I could study. But when the time came for me to become a computer systems engineer, academic burnout was stronger than my naive childhood dreams. Once I understood how things worked, they lost their charm. During college, I became aware that technological evolution doesn't depend on a scientist or dreamers like me, but on what suits the world's most influential figures to grant access to the rest of society. If they need confidential information, they launch a social network, and people voluntarily give them their data. So, I focused on studying, learning, knowing, and preparing myself to land a job that would allow me to repay my family for their support and live comfortably. At 26, with a permanent contract signed with a digital communications company and a modest apartment with a down payment covered, I sat in front of the television one afternoon and felt the weight of failure crushing me. I don't know why, but I felt like I had betrayed my inner child. Instead of inventing something amazing, I spent my days sitting in front of a computer, ruining my back and destroying my eyes from the screen's brightness. I imagine it was that crisis that forced me to look for a way to bring excitement to my days. I urgently needed to experience something that would confirm I was still alive and that life was worth living. I'm sure that's not the best justification. I was probably just depressed and did the first foolish thing that came to mind. Sometimes I finished work early and had time to waste online. During those times, I browsed the web, looking to buy something that would fill the emptiness in my chest. I read reviews of popular books and analyzed countless collectibles that might look good on my shelves, but nothing quite convinced me. By that point, I was so fed up that I couldn't focus on anything. I was always in a bad mood, responded harshly to my coworkers, and distanced myself from my family. Sometimes, I had lucid moments where I realized how ridiculous my behavior was. But then I'd go right back to the same pattern. One day, I told a friend I was looking for something to entertain me, but couldn't find anything worthwhile. He suggested several websites selling antiques and objects with eerie histories, but he also recommended I take a look at the underworld, meaning get into the deep web. In the following days, I browsed various shady-looking sites, and when I ran out of energy, I downloaded an application that allowed me to access the deep web, where names, IP addresses, or other data to locate people aren't necessary. To start, I typed interesting things to buy into the main search bar, and I got thousands of results. I was amazed at the number of illegal items being offered there, such as intimate material involving unimaginable practices, some bordering on criminal. Drugs, weapons, malicious software, or unconventional professional services like hacking or obtaining medical records. The deeper I went into the lists, the more intrigued I became by the offers, but none fully captured my attention. Then I came across a link with the headline, "Diabolical Dolls." I opened the page, and before my eyes appeared a catalog of toys that promised to be inhabited by a demon or evil spirit. Throughout the page were signs that said, "Get your doll now, and add the excitement your life needs." It felt like the page was spying on me since it offered exactly what I was looking for. I scrolled through the navigation bar, intending to choose my order, and noticed they had an extensive collection of bizarre toys with sinister appearances, each more horrifying than the last. I spent 2 hours trying to make a decision, but none of the products fully captured my interest. Some were visually repulsive, with descriptions like, "found in a cemetery." But I was about to give up when I was captivated by a smiling clown, with a mouth and eyes bordered in white, a bright red nose, and rosy cheeks. Its face didn't have a single feature that betrayed the evil that accompanied it. The only strange thing was that its suit appeared to be stained with some reddish substance, and it held a black heart-shaped balloon in its hands. The description said that this sweet, childlike figure had been found in the house of a disgusting man who kidnapped children under 10 and used it to entertain them while he prepared the horrific things he usually did to them. At first, the subject repulsed me, and I closed the window, but as I looked at other alternatives, I realized it was the one that most aligned with my interests. I selected the clown, put it in the virtual cart, and pressed the pay button. On that page, they didn't ask for my first or last name. A pop-up window opened with a field to enter the card number, purchase code, and delivery address. Nothing more. I immediately received a notification from my bank alerting me about a charge with no description, but since I knew exactly what it was about, I ignored it and sat down to wait. There was a chance I had been scammed, but the payment wasn't too high. If the adventure ended up being a bust, I wouldn't have lost much, and I'd at least have a story to tell. I was scammed on the deep web. However, 3 days later when I got home from work, I found a black wrap box at my apartment door. Seeing it gave me chills, as if some kind of evil energy was emanating from the mysterious box. Of course, I was also excited. I knew what was inside. I took the package inside, my hands trembling as I opened it. A few minutes later, I was holding the clown I had bought that same week. Overall, it was an ordinary toy, but the stain on its clothing looked suspicious. It was stiff, and when I touched it, some blackened flakes fell off, almost as if it were real dried blood. The box in which my delivery arrived had no indication of who sent it, but it did contain a note that read, "Thank you for purchasing a diabolical doll. If you want to speed up the experience, welcome it into your home." For a few seconds I hesitated, then I thought, isn't this what I wanted? I grabbed the toy, looked it in the face, and whispered, "From this moment, my home is your home. You can do whatever you want here." I don't know what I was expecting, maybe that the thing would float and a monstrous devil would emerge from it. But nothing happened. I placed it on one of the shelves and continued my night as usual. At 7, I worked out. At 8, I had a light dinner. And by 9, I lay down to watch TV for a bit until I drifted off to sleep. The first strange thing that happened in my home was simple. I don't turn off the TV to sleep, but when I opened my eyes, the screen was black and the remote was still under my pillow, with no possibility of having been activated by accident. I went to work, and as I was closing the door, I glanced inside, specifically at the shelf where the clown sat, still in the same position I had left it. My workday was boring. I left at the usual time, and to do something different, I stopped by to visit my parents. I returned to the apartment around 7 and found it as spotless as usual. However, when I went to the shower, I found my toothbrush on the floor. I picked it up casually and put it back in place. At that moment, I didn't think it was a paranormal event unfolding in my home. In fact, I didn't even stop to reflect on it. I just continued with my life. Nothing weird happened the second night or the second day, but on the third night, after buying the doll, I had a horrible nightmare. I was lying in my house, able to see everything around me, and some unnatural force was preventing me from moving or speaking. The only thing I could do was roll my eyes and make muffled noises from my throat. I stayed like that for quite some time until the door to my bedroom opened and the small clown appeared. A wave of intense fear gripped me. I was sure it was just an ordinary doll, a hoax to make easy money, and I couldn't believe what my eyes were seeing. The toy clumsily dragged itself from the doorway to my bed, and I heard it jump onto the blanket. I noticed its desperate movements as it climbed up the fabric, and after a few minutes, it peeked over the edge. My eyes met its own, and I confirmed what I feared. They looked different, far too real and bloodshot. They had lost all their cuteness and showed an inhuman ferocity. The clown kept moving its tiny limbs, maneuvering to climb up my legs and reach my stomach. Once there, it used the wand that held its balloon and began stabbing my abdomen until blood started to flow. I couldn't believe it. The agonizing pain tormented me, and I couldn't open my mouth to call for help. My hands and legs didn't respond either. I was doomed to endure the way that cursed toy mutilated me for reasons beyond my comprehension. At some point, I felt my skin tear, and the clown inserted its plastic hand, twisting my organs with malice. It was right then that I couldn't take it anymore. The pain was unbearable, and I lost consciousness. I was supposed to be dreaming, but even within that macabre fantasy, my mind collapsed. I opened my eyes when my alarm went off for work. I jumped out of bed, panting like a dog after finishing a run. I turned on the light and looked around my room, which was empty, orderly, and calm. Only the bed was disheveled, as if I had been tossing and turning violently during the night. Nothing was out of place, yet when I touched my abdomen, I felt a sharp pain. I quickly lifted my pajama shirt and discovered an awful bruise that wasn't there before I went to bed. I ran to the living room. The doll was still on the shelf, but I realized something. It was leaning to the left. I had placed it upright and facing forward. My heart pounded. I became deliriously paranoid, grabbed the toy, stuffed it in a bag, and threw it in the trash bin. As usual, I got ready to leave, showered, and had breakfast. Before 8 in the morning, I took the trash out, left my apartment, and went to the old dumpster where I emptied the garbage. I was already walking away when a pang of insecurity made me check if I had taken out everything I needed to. I rummaged through the trash I had just dumped and noticed that the item I intended to discard wasn't in the bag. I ran back to my apartment, terrified of opening the door and seeing the clown back on the shelf, but it wasn't. To my surprise and horror, I found it under the couch, wedged into a gap where only a thin slipper could fit due to the limited space. I pulled it out, bent, with its balloon battered and almost ruined, and it returned my gaze with a sweet, innocent look, just as it had been designed in the factory from which it came. I took it in my hand and threw it into the dumpster so a garbage truck could take it out of my sight. At work, I felt uncomfortable. My abdominal area hurt a lot, and the painkillers had little effect. When I left, I headed home, and as I got closer, a trembling took over my knees. What was I going to do if upon opening the door I found the clown again? I opened the door with fear and peeked in like a thief. The place was calm. I turned on the light and sighed in relief. The horrible toy was nowhere to be seen. I checked every corner and then collapsed onto the couch, satisfied. It wasn't there, and I was sure I would never see it again. I embraced the tranquility as if it were the most valuable thing in my existence. However, around 9 at night, someone knocked on my door. When I looked through the peephole, I saw it was a nearby neighbor, and I opened the door without question. As soon as I did, I saw that the woman was holding the clown in her hands. She held it out to me and said, "I found your doll, don't lose it again." Then she turned around without saying goodbye and left me standing there with my mouth open. A chill ran through me from head to toe. Every hair on my body stood on end, and I made a motion to throw the evil figure as far away as possible. However, my hand remained still. I was paralyzed for several minutes, unable to look away from the small toy. It seemed incredible to me that something so tiny was turning my world upside down. I spent more than 10 minutes in a dazed state, a mix of wonder and disbelief. Then, I went inside and placed the clown back on the shelf. My movements felt strange. I sensed foreign impulses in my head, and I even considered that something was controlling me. Yet I allowed myself to go along with it. To this day, I still don't understand what happened. As I took a bath and went to bed, I didn't have nightmares or suffer any attacks, but in the middle of my dreams I heard strange voices, guttural sounds, like the growls of some enraged beast. Although I tried to open my eyes at times, I couldn't. As soon as my alarm went off, I opened my eyes and was greeted by a massive wreck. The television lay on the floor, split in two, the furniture was overturned, and the contents of my bedside tables were scattered across the room. I went to the living room and saw my sofa shredded. The kitchen dishes formed piles of twisted metal, broken glass, or shattered ceramics. The financial loss from this event would be around 50,000 pesos, but at that moment, my mind could only think of one thing. While my house was being destroyed, I had slept peacefully, oblivious to whatever had been moving throughout my humble abode. I slowly turned to face the clown's shelf. It was the only thing that remained in place. I stared at it, and it seemed that the bloodstains on its clothes looked redder, as if they were fresh. I imagined many things. I saw myself dead inside my apartment, rotting in the solitude of those walls, or overwhelmed by the situation, losing my sanity entirely, screaming at something I couldn't see, though I had given it permission to invade my space. I wished my parents would knock on the door so I could run into their arms and have them get rid of the unbearable toy I had foolishly bought in a fit of ignorance. Unfortunately, none of that happened. That thing, along with whatever it carried, had me at its mercy. I started to feel drowsy again, but this time I resisted. For reasons I still don't understand, I began to pray in my mind. That action, which some people consider ridiculous nowadays, helped me break free from the demonic force emanating from the doll. I ran to my room, grabbed a backpack, and returned to the living room. Without stopping the prayers I had learned in my childhood, I threw the wicked doll into the bottom of the bag and rushed out of my apartment. I ran for almost 6 blocks, letting nothing and no one block my way, ignoring the people trying to stop me to sell various products or warn me that the traffic light was about to change. A large truck nearly hit me before I reached my destination, but in the end, I managed to arrive at the church, and I entered without asking for permission. As soon as I stepped onto sacred ground, my legs cramped up. Inside my head, I heard a sharp scream and strange squeals, among which I made out the words, "Get me out of here." I didn't listen. I forced myself to keep going. I fell to my knees on the chapel steps, so I crawled to reach the altar. A few meters from a large crucified Christ, the priest of the church emerged from a side door and screamed when he saw me. The man, about 60 years old, rushed to help me. However, As soon as he touched me, he jumped back and demanded to know what was wrong with me. Through stammering and tears, I told him that I had bought a doll a few days ago, and now it wouldn't stop tormenting me. At first, his face showed disbelief, but he admitted to me that he could feel a malicious, indescribable energy, which indicated the truth of my bizarre words. He went to the altar and brought out a bottle of wine, then looked at me mercifully and offered me a drink. As soon as the liquid went down my throat, I felt my body freed from thick, invisible chains. I was able to stand up and let go of the backpack. After regaining control of myself, I knelt and asked for forgiveness. I acknowledged my mistake aloud and begged for the torment to end. I regretted being so foolish and ignorant as to challenge beings over whom I had no control whatsoever. The priest let me speak as he prepared a few items: a white candle, holy water, a consecrated host, and a Bible with gilded pages. Once I fell silent, the priest began a sacred litany in front of the backpack where the clown remained, and after reciting the words of the Holy Scriptures, he ate the host. Later, he instructed me, "Pick up that thing and follow me." Of course, I refused, but he told me that the spirit of the doll could no longer touch me. I picked up the backpack with only 2 fingers and began a walk that led to the kitchens of the church. Since it was an old building, it still had chimneys and ancient stoves, which were active as the workers were about to prepare lunch. The priest, never letting go of the Bible or the candle, told me to place the bag in the chimney, and I did so immediately. As it burned, the clown seemed to twist and contort. There was a deafening creak that echoed up the walls of the church and resounded in the bell tower. In my mind, I saw a horrifying image, a creature without skin writhing in the flames, begging me to take it out so we could go home. Of course, I remained still, letting the burning wood cleanse my greatest mistake. Once the embers had consumed all the plastic and fabric that made up the clown, the priest took my hands, looked into my eyes, and said, "There are things one should not play with. It seems you came just in time, but the forces of evil do not forgive. They can exact a high price from humans for their foolishness. I hope you think carefully before considering doing something like this again. You might not come out unscathed or even alive." Inside the building consecrated to God, I apologized repeatedly to the man, then thanked him and gave him the money I had with me. We said our goodbyes before noon. I remember the priest walking me to the chapel door, and I continued along an open path to reach the street. As soon as my foot touched the sidewalk, my phone began to ring. I didn't even remember I had it with me. I pulled it out and saw it was my mom. As soon as I answered, I knew something was wrong. I heard her uncontrollable sobbing, and her desperation made her speak in a rushed and jumbled manner. Despite that, I understood what she was trying to tell me. My father had just had a serious accident. From the church, I ran again to reach the avenue and hailed a taxi. I urged the driver to take me to my parents' house, and I jumped out as soon as we arrived, paying him via bank transfer since I had no cash. I didn't need to ring the doorbell. The door was open, and my mom was rocking in a chair at the dining table. I asked her to tell me what had happened, and she could only manage to hand me her phone. There was an open video. I hit play, and the camera focused on a television news report. The presenters were talking about a serious car accident in which apparently only one person had died. The camera zoomed in on the scene, and although the truck was crushed from colliding with the base of a pedestrian bridge, I recognized it as my father's vehicle. In the passenger seat from a distance, the limp body of a person could be seen, but the channel quickly blurred the image. They didn't realize that for a split second they had focused on the unfortunate person's face. So I paused the undesirable video and went frame by frame to eliminate all doubt. It took some effort, but in the end, I managed to find a shot where the driver's face was clearly visible. At that moment, the phone slipped from my hands, and a colossal terror made me tremble. The man who gave me life had his face twisted and bloodied. However, the blood had spread across his face in a way that made it look like he was painted as a clown. The police contacted us hours later, and that marked the beginning of a long bureaucratic process. At one point, they showed us a video in which my father could be seen driving and suddenly letting go of the wheel, as if he had lost control of his body. We buried him several days later, and I held my mother for hours as she couldn't stop crying. Every time I saw her tear-streaked cheeks, I wanted to confess to her what I had done, to tell her that I was responsible for her beloved partner no longer being with her. But I didn't have the courage to do it. Just as the priest had said, evil demands interest for the foolish actions one takes, and I would carry a terrible punishment. The remorse, the guilt, and the secret of what I had caused by not valuing the wonderful life I had. Dear friends, thank you so much for staying with me until the end of tonight's stories. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on all notifications so you won't miss a single horror story. See you in the next episode of Dark Secret.